We continue our story with Bagorah flying over the city. He's looking and scouring, but he doesn't really find anything too satisfying for him. He wants to eat. He thinks about it, and then he kind of just sits down on the building like, dang, okay, we got all these humans in here, but geez, where can I find like a big cluster of them to eat? This is, pretty interesting, but whatever. However, this is where Homelander arrives. Still kind of battered and bruised from his battle with Zilla. And, well, he thinks, oh, great, another kaiju? Fine, I'll take care of this one. How bad could this one be? And he actually flies at it full force and then uses his heat vision, and it does absolutely nothing but probably singe a tiny little back hair on Bagora. And he's still thinking like, wind's mighty aggressive today, but ooh, let me get this one. And so he picks up a human and eats him. And this is where Homeland is like, dagnabbit, these monsters, these kaiju, but why? Why can't I do anything? Why can't I harm them? I'm the strongest. I was the strongest. But why can't I gotta find... I gotta... Ugh. So this is where we actually see A-Train down below actually just helping out and recollecting or, evacuating citizens. And then Homelander simply calls him out. Obviously in his more disrespectful format because, this isn't their more developed relationship, right? And this is where he simply states, where's Maeve? Where's Starlight? Where's Noir? And A-Train's like, well, Maeve and Starlight are both at the docks, making sure people get on boats and get out of here. And Noir is with the military. And Deep is also making sure the seaways are clear. Yeah. And he's like, I'm stuck with you. Yep. But this is where Bagora actually decides to let out a high-pitched roar to actually start surveying the area. Meanwhile, on Laui Beach, we actually have the people relaxing, celebrating. And this is where we actually see Nani, Lilo, and Stitch surfing, having a fun time, remembering, David for all he was. Keep in mind, this is still a couple hours, and I'll probably say it's like maybe the crack of like dawn or something like that, or kind of like dusk. It's almost nighttime, and Zilla's underneath, pretty much just swimming around and having fun along with them. And as they all get to the surface, and Zilla turns to his human form, and Nani's like, I'm really glad you decided to stay, and maybe you could still do that. To which Zilla's like, you want me, a monster, to stay with you? To his daughter's like, well, you do eat a lot. You've also slept on my couch, and you've saved me more than once in a span of a couple hours and almost a near day. To which Zilla's like, you know what? In fairness, I guess that is fair. But again, don't get too attached to me. I don't even know if I'll be here permanently. Don't even know what my place in the world is, to be honest, and I don't know. This where Nani's kind of like, well, considering you are one of the only good monsters, or, well, sorry, I guess you did say one of the few, right? To which is like, yes, I did say that. Me and my friends just want to live in peace. And to which is like, great, maybe you can possibly be a monster detective, and maybe you can, I don't know, maybe help us move to the big city? I mean, here it's always the same thing, day in and day out. I want to actually do something. Maybe even go to college and have a career, To which Zilla's like, well, I never thought about doing something like that before. And then this is where they all hear a bone-chilling screech. And to which Zilla's like, oh, great, not him. And so he turns into his kaiju form, and before he does, he says, look, I'll be back. We can discuss everything for our future later, okay? Tristana's like, yeah, sure, just be careful, okay? So, turns into his kaiju form, gives Nani a wink, and then swims off like the goat that he is. But this is where we get to the harbor, fast forward maybe a couple minutes later, and it's almost nighttime. The last few ships are leaving. However, this is where Bagora swoops down and actually takes one of the ships, cracks it open like a Kit Kat bar, But instead of eating it, he actually pours the humans down his throat from one side and then down another and the other, and then crunch. Just a big bloody crunch right then and there. And Maeve and Starlight are both horrified, like, oh my god, how do we stop that thing? She's like, I don't know, maybe I can blind her or something. However, this is where they actually hear a little rumble beneath the waves. And so this is where the water actually begins to, I guess you could say, the tide begins to recede a little bit, and Zilla walks onto the shore and even scans around the area. So he's like, huh, so this is the big city that Nani wanted to move to. It's not bad from what I remember. I mean, looks far better, I guess, but whatever. However, this one he gets shot inside of the head by the military, led by Black Noir. And this is where Noir, obviously he can't speak here, this is still the original, simply points at him and tells him to open fire. And this is where they actually begin to hit Zilla with everything they got. Missiles, guns, and, high caliber rounds and stuff like that. And Zilla's simply like, you know what? I tried. I really did. And so this is where he uses his power breath to simply demolish the last remaining forces of Vaught's military. And this completely, and I mean this in every single way, completely incinerates Noir. No skeleton, no suit, no nothing. Not even a little black ash, I guess you could say, stain print remains of him. And this is where Bagora finally takes notice and simply roars at him. And so Zilla, seeing the opportunity, now has a chance to engage the Kaiju now that he has in its intention. While he's not for harming innocent people, he still knows he's got to do what he got to do, and collateral damage does happen, considering they are just giant monsters, but he does try his best. This is where he actually starts leaping from building to building, and then this is where we get the scene with Zilla and Bagora going tooth for claw, scratch for scratch, sonic shriek for monstrous roar, and the two of them have a titanic battle. But this is how it would start off. Zilla leaps at Bagora from the building, but Bagora simply catches him in its talons. However, Zilla uses its arms to actually show you, I guess you could say, superior grip strength, and this brings Bagora and him down. Bagora, still kind of, keeping himself upright by the air, comes down for a bite on Zilla. However, Zilla positions himself a little forward so that Bagora bites down on a scoot, breaking some of his teeth. Then Zilla goes in to ram him into one of the buildings. While he kind of hoped it was empty, it is what it is. It's kind of like an invincible situation. Look, I'm going to have to use something. And obviously the ground is a little too far for me. So, yeah, that building right there, it looks perfectly nice for a little bit of kaiju action, So he rams Bagora into the building. Bagora, then utilizing its talon on its wings, digs them into Zilla's sides, actually beginning to pierce it. Zilla, seeing this, backs off and bites Bagora right in the neck, lifting him in the air like Devil Joe would Diablos, and slams the bat right on its head, only to get tail whipped back. Zilla, feeling offended by this, spins around and tail whips Bagora and pretty much smacks him like a baseball bat. And this is where Bagora is sent flying, not only, tumbling backwards, but then jumps into the air and actually tries to get some distance. However, Zilla is positioning him. He wants Bagora in one spot, one area, to make sure casualties are pretty much minimized. He needs him towards the harbor again, so that he can get him underwater. So this is where Zilla actually sees an oil tanker, and he thinks to himself, considering his breath is highly combustible and flammable, oh, this is gonna be great. So this is actually where Zilla actually takes the oil truck as Bagora is coming in with its talons, right, and he eats the truck, like just bites it down in one gulp, And then this kind of like causes the oil and substance to kind of like go in, and then he spews it out with his roar, basically giving a little bit of a flamethrower, if you will. And this is where it does hit Bagora, but eventually this does have to dissipate. But Zilla did his job, and then full force rams Bagora, making sure he stays there. Bagora is trying to get away, but Zilla bites down right on, I guess you could say, his ankle, like right between his, his foot and, I guess you say, the first bending point, if you will, if you look at the Neo picture carefully. So yeah, he bites down on his leg and could just rams him. He slams him into a building every now and then just to kind of keep him on the back foot. However, Bagora decides to utilize his final weapon, his sonic shriek. Utilizing it with full force, this actually hit Zilla right in the back, causing him to basically trip and then slam face first into the ground. Bagora then pins him and is about to use his jaws in order to actually eat Zilla alive. However, Zilla still has one appendage that can still reach that far: his tail. And this is where Zilla simply shoots his tail forward and then smacks Bagora right on the head, causing the creature to basically stagger and tumble back. This is when Zilla takes his claws and then slashes upward, cutting Bagora's chest and some of his throat. But now Zilla has him right where he needs him, right towards the harbor. However, before Zilla can really enact on this, someone hits him in the back with a heat vision. Homelander. He's like, die, die, die. Why can't any of you die? Especially you after what you did to Stormfront. However, Zilla kind of looks at him like, dude, really? I could end you. Like right here, right now. I'm 2 for 2 on the hero standpoint. Hero. However, this is where Bagora finally is able to fix himself up and actually is able to use a sonic shriek, which knocks Homelander completely back. Keep in mind, Zilla's body's kind of like semi-shielding him, so Homelander's not really sent flying. He's sent flying into a building and is laid out unconscious with broken bones. However, this isn't the end here. Bagora still uses his screech and keeps it up as long as he can against Zilla. Zilla, now seeing that he has Bagora right where he wants him, doesn't waste any time. He leaps forward and grabs him, straight up just ignoring the scream entirely. His ears hurt, mind you, but when he gets underwater, it's over. He begins to pin Bagora beneath and bites at his wings. He bites at him, bites at his arms, sinking his teeth deeper and deeper until blood is spewing out. This is where he then pulls back and yanks the entire arm off, causing Bagora to scream out in pain. But he doesn't stop. He keeps going, tearing at him, biting down on Bagora's head until that begins to rip and tear. And so, Bagora has 3 body parts that flow up. First his wing, then his head, then his full body. Maeve and Starlight are both visibly shocked and startled. It's absolutely horrifying. And the body's just left there, while Zilla is nowhere to be found. But this is where we fast forward and end it off here. 1 week later, after the incident. And this is where we see this Cameron guy actually giving the news interview, saying that monsters have now been sighted all over the world. These kaiju, if you will. Some living peacefully, claiming territory of their own, while others seem to have unknown motives. We don't know exactly what's going on. We don't know exactly what specifically or where specifically they came from. But we do know this. Kaiju are in our world. We don't know their intentions, and we know good and well they are capable of wiping out humanity. Meanwhile, with Homelander, he's actually unconscious, unfortunately. Our greatest hero is, unfortunately, now barely anything. Just a man like any of us. And I think it's time we start looking at superheroes like that. Not invincible. However, these kaiju, oh yeah, they seem to be invincible. But the question does remain, what happened to that one kaiju? What happened to the one that saved us? The one that actually went out of its way to try and make sure people were all okay. However, this is where we head over to Hawaii, where Nani and Zilla are both cuddled up and resting after a long, finally a full week together, now being a couple. But that's going to be all for today. Be sure to comment down below, like, subscribe, and share with your friends. And I will be adding some new characters to the series just to kind of connect it to the sequel series. Peace.